The emergency beacon screamed across 7 star systems before anyone heard it. The signal carried images that made even the oldest members of the Galactic Council turn away from their viewing screens. Crystalline bodies lay shattered across golden streets. Buildings that had stood for 3,000 years were collapsing into dust. And through it all, the Krovax swarm moved like a dark tide, consuming everything in its path. Ambassador Velrus coughed, and tiny crystal fragments fell from her mouth. Her people were made of living mineral, beautiful and fragile. She had been beautiful once. Now half her face was cracked, leaking the glowing fluid that served as her blood. Behind her, through the broken window of the council chamber, shapes moved in the smoke. "Hungry shapes, please," she whispered into the recorder. "Anyone who receives this message. We are the Velkar of Thessia 9, we are dying. The Krovax came without warning. Our defense fleet lasted 4 hours. Our cities are falling. In 2 days there will be nothing left of us but empty shells and memories. Please." We begged the Galactic Council. "Send help." The recording ended. The chamber fell silent. Counselor Thrain, a massive being covered in blue fur, shook his head slowly. The Krovax swarm. I had hoped never to hear that name again. They destroyed the Pelthian Reach 50 years ago, ate every living thing on 6 worlds. Our military response protocols require formal votes, said Counselor Vreet, her tentacles twitching nervously. Deployment authorization, fleet composition, rules of engagement. The process takes at minimum 3 weeks. The Velkar do not have 3 weeks. Around the circular chamber, representatives from 40 species sat in their specialized seats. Some breathed oxygen, others methane, still others required no atmosphere at all. But they all wore the same expression now. Helplessness. Quirith stood up. He was young for a Zentari, barely 200 years old. His silver skin caught the light as he moved. There must be something we can do. Anything. We cannot simply watch another species die. Sit down, Junior Diplomat Quirith, Thrain rumbled. You do not understand war. The Krovax are not raiders or pirates. They are a force of nature. Our fastest battle fleet would take 9 days to reach Thessia 9. By then, what about the Deathworlders? The chamber went silent. Several counselors made gestures of warding in their various cultural traditions. You speak of things you do not understand, boy, Vreet said softly. That world is quarantined for good reason. I have read the files, Quirith insisted. His voice shook, but he did not sit down. Earth classified as a Class 12 death world. Gravity 1.4 times standard. Atmosphere partially composed of a corrosive gas that burns fuel. Weather systems that generate wind speeds capable of destroying buildings. Tectonic activity that regularly devastates population centers. And the dominant species evolved not just to survive these conditions, but to thrive in them. Exactly why they are dangerous, Thrain growled. The humans were discovered 200 years ago. The first contact team spent 1 day observing them. Do you know what they saw? Humans throwing themselves out of aircraft for recreation. Humans climbing mountains that would kill most species just to see the view. Humans consuming poison for pleasure and calling it alcohol. They fight each other constantly over everything, and they seem to enjoy it. Their entire civilization is built on conflict. But they survive, Quirith said. Their planet tries to kill them, and they survive. Is that not exactly what we need right now? Someone who knows how to fight impossible odds? Counselor Vreet's tentacles knotted together in agitation. 30 years ago, a human ship entered Council space without authorization. When our patrol fleet attempted to intercept it, the humans refused to stop. They led our ships through an asteroid field at speeds that should have been impossible. 3 of our vessels were destroyed by impacts. The human ship emerged without a scratch. When we finally cornered them, do you know what the human captain said? He laughed and said they were just testing their new engine. Testing. They could have killed themselves a dozen times over. And they were testing. They also, Quirith said quietly, have never started a war with any council species. Every contact report says the same thing. Humans are dangerous, yes, but they are not cruel. They feel compassion. They protect weaker beings. There are stories of human explorers risking their lives to save crashed ships from other species, even species they had never met before. Stories, Thrain said dismissively. We have 2 days, Quirith said. Maybe less. The Krovax will not stop. They will not negotiate. They will eat the Velkar down to the last child, and then they will move to the next system. We can spend 3 weeks debating, or we can call the Deathworlders and see if the stories are true. The silence stretched. Through the chamber windows, the stars turned slowly. Somewhere out there, the Velkar were dying. Counselor Vreet finally spoke. I will not have this decision on my conscience alone. We vote. All in favor of contacting the human homeworld and requesting military assistance? Quirith raised his hand immediately. Then slowly others joined him. Not all, not even most, but enough. May the ancestors forgive us, Thrain muttered. Send the message. The quantum transmission reached Earth 3 hours later. In Geneva, in a building that had witnessed 2 centuries of human diplomacy, General James Okoye read the message twice. Then he called the UDC command center. Get me Captain Chen. Yes, now. I don't care if she's on leave. And activate the Rapid Response Fleet. Tell them to prep for combat operations in hostile territory. His aide, a young lieutenant who had never seen real combat, hesitated. Sir, the Council is asking for help against the Krovac swarm. Intelligence says they're a parasitic hive species. Highly aggressive. They've destroyed multiple civilizations. I know what they are, Lieutenant. Then, sir, with respect, shouldn't we send our heavy cruisers? The full battle fleet? This sounds like... Lieutenant, Okoye interrupted. What do you think happens when you send a distress call to Earth and we show up? The young man blinked. We help them, sir? No. They get to see what evolution on a death world actually produces. They get to see what happens when you take an apex predator species, give them thumbs and brains and nuclear weapons, and then ask them very nicely to go fight your war for you. Okoye's dark eyes were hard. They asked for our help. They're going to get it. God help them all. Within 6 hours, 4 human vessels departed Earth orbit. The Hammer of Dawn led the formation, its hull painted in adaptive camouflage that made it seem to flicker in and out of existence. Captain Maria Chen stood on the bridge watching the stars shift as they entered FTL. Estimated time to Thessia 9? She asked. 38 hours at maximum burn, Captain, her navigation officer replied. We're pushing the engines past safe limits. The Velkar don't have safe limits. Keep us at max burn. Chen pulled up the distress signal and watched it again, the fear in Ambassador Velris's eyes, the shapes moving in the smoke. Captain, her first officer said quietly, the Council transmitted engagement protocols, rules of war, banned weapons, civilian protection guidelines. It's extensive. Chen didn't look away from the screen. File it under suggestions. When we get there, we fight like humans. That's what they asked for, whether they know it or not. Behind the ship, Earth receded into darkness. Ahead, 7 light-years away, the Krovac swarm fed on a dying world, and racing toward them through the void came something they had never encountered before. Deathworlders were coming, and they were done being afraid. The Thessia system looked like hell had opened up and spilled across the stars. Captain Maria Chen stood on the bridge of the Hammer of Dawn, watching the tactical display update. 3 Velkar colony worlds, 2 completely dark, their cities silent. The third, Thessia 9, still showed scattered life signs, but the Krovac's biosignatures covered the planet like a disease. Millions of heat blooms where the swarm fed and bred. Christ, muttered Lieutenant Torres at the sensor station. There's so many of them. Chen had seen the intelligence files on the Krovacs. Insectoid bodies the size of dogs, covered in black chitin harder than steel. They moved in swarms of thousands, coordinated by pheromone signals and hive queens. They ate everything, organic or not. Metal, plastic, flesh, it all went into their mouths and came out as more Krovacs. Council fleet is hailing us, Captain, the communications officer reported. They're maintaining position at the system's edge. They want us to wait for them to coordinate an attack. How long? They estimate 6 hours to form battle formation and agree on tactical approach. Chen's jaw tightened. Tell them we're going in now. They can coordinate all they want from back there. Captain, they're insisting we follow galactic military protocol. Tell them Earth never signed their protocols. We're doing this our way. The human fleet accelerated. 4 ships against a swarm that had destroyed entire civilizations. Behind them, safely distant, the Council fleet watched in what their translators described as profound concern. On the Council flagship Harmonious Purpose, Quirith stood with the military observers. His silver skin had turned almost white with stress. They are moving directly toward the planet. No formation, no coordination signals that we can detect. This is suicide. Admiral Krenthis, a four-armed veteran of a dozen campaigns, shook his head. I fought the Krovax once 50 years ago. We lost 3 battle groups before we retreated. The swarm does not fear. It does not tire. It just keeps coming until you are bones. He gestured at the display. These humans do not understand what they face. The human ships hit the outer system at a speed that made the alien observers gasp. They were pulling acceleration that would turn most species into paste against their bulkheads. The ships did not slow down. Chen felt the pressure in her chest as the inertial dampeners struggled to compensate. The bridge crew worked at their stations with practiced efficiency. They were all veterans. They had all volunteered for this. Contact in 30 seconds, Torres called out. The swarm is launching. Jesus, they've got thousands of fighters incoming. Point defense online. Launch countermeasures. And get me firing solutions on those hive ships in orbit. The Krovax fighters hit them like a black wave. The aliens watching from the Council fleet had never seen human point defense systems in action. Humanity had spent centuries developing weapons to shoot down missiles traveling at hypersonic speeds through atmosphere. In space, with no air resistance, those same systems were devastating. The automated turrets spun and fired hundreds of rounds per second. Tracer fire lit up the void. Krovax fighters exploded by the dozen, then by the 100, but more kept coming. Brace for impact, Chen ordered calmly. Activate hull plating. Krovax fighters slammed into the hammer of Dawn's hull. The ship shuddered. On any other vessel, the hulls would have cracked. Human ships were built different. Earth's gravity required heavier construction. Their atmosphere required better sealing. Their tendency to crash ships into planets during testing required armor that could take punishment. The Krovax claws scraped against military-grade steel and found no purchase. Return fire. All weapons. The Hammer of Dawn had been built in orbit above Earth, assembled by workers in spacesuits who joked and complained and occasionally died from accidents. It carried weapons that violated a dozen galactic conventions on warfare. Humans had looked at the rules for civilized combat and decided that survival mattered more than etiquette. Railguns accelerated tungsten slugs to a fraction of light speed. No explosions, no warnings, just kinetic energy in mass. The slugs punched through Krovax hive ships like tissue paper. Atmosphere vented. The swarm boiled out into space, thousands of them dying in seconds as the void froze them solid. Hit on Hive Ship 1. Catastrophic damage. It's breaking apart. Target Hive Ship 2. Fire when ready. On the Council flagship, the observers watched in stunned silence as the human ships carved through the swarm's outer defenses. Admiral Krenthis's 4 hands gripped the railing so hard his knuckles turned pale. This is not how warfare is conducted, he whispered. They are not trying to disable or capture. They are simply destroying. Quirith could not look away from the display. They are winning. The human assault craft launched from the Hammer of Dawn's hangar bays. They were ugly things built for function over form. Inside, Marine Sergeant Marcus Webb checked his squad's equipment one last time. 20 soldiers in powered armor heading down to hell. Remember the briefing, he said over the squad channel. The Velkar are crystalline. They look fragile because they are. Watch your fire. The bugs are fair game. Shoot anything that moves and isn't shiny. Sergeant, Private Chen, no relation to the captain, said nervously. The files say the Krovax can bite through most armor. Most armor isn't made on Earth, kid. Our stuff is built to handle re-entry without a heat shield if we have to. Some big bugs aren't going to be a problem. The assault craft hit atmosphere hard. No gentle descent. They came in like meteors, heat shields glowing white hot. The Krovax on the ground looked up at the new stars falling from the sky. They landed in the middle of Thessia 9's capital city. What had been a place of art and learning was now a feeding ground. Velkar bodies lay everywhere. Some were still moving, still alive, crystalline limbs twitching as the poison worked through them. Spread out, Webb ordered. Find survivors. Kill bugs. The Marines moved through the city in pairs, weapons ready. They were trained for urban combat on Earth where enemies could hide in every shadow. Here the Krovax did not hide. They came in waves. Private Chen fired the first burst. Her rifle chattered, and a Krovax that had been crawling over a pile of rubble came apart in a spray of ichor. More appeared, dozens, hundreds, contact. We got a swarm incoming? The Marines formed a perimeter. Their armor's external speakers began blasting sound, human death metal music at volumes that made the air vibrate. The Krovax used pheromones to communicate. The noise disrupted them, made them confused, and confused enemies died easier. Webb stood his ground as the swarm crashed against them. His rifle ran dry. He drew his sidearm. That ran dry. He pulled his combat knife, 30 centimeters of folded steel that humans had been killing each other with for thousands of years, and started stabbing. On the Council flagship, they watched the Marines' helmet camera feeds. They saw humans fighting in conditions that would kill most species in minutes. The city air was full of Krovax spores toxic to almost everything. The humans' armor filtered it out and they kept fighting. One squad, Admiral Krenthis said. 20 soldiers. They have eliminated over 300 Krovax in 4 minutes. This is impossible. No, Quirith said softly. This is what evolution on a death world produces. They are not stronger than the Krovax. They are not faster, but they do not stop. They never stop. In the city, Sergeant Webb's knife broke. He grabbed a piece of crystalline debris, part of a Velkar building, and used it as a club. Behind him, Private Chen had run out of ammunition and was beating Krovax with her empty rifle, and still they fought. Captain Chen watched from orbit as her Marines carved a safe zone in the city. Velkar survivors were being gathered, protected. The swarm was pulling back, regrouping. They had never faced prey that fought back this hard. Captain, we have a problem, Torres said. Long-range sensors are picking up another hive ship. It's approaching from the outer system. Big one. Estimate mass at 3 times the ones we already destroyed. Chen smiled. It was not a nice smile. Good, I was hoping Mama would show up. Prep the Omega warheads. Captain, those are banned by... Are they banned by Earth? No, ma'am. Then prep them. It's time the Krovax learned what happens when you pick a fight with Deathworlders. The Hive Queen was ancient by Krovax standards. She had lived for 40 standard years, consuming her way across the galaxy. She had eaten the Pelthian scientist who had begged for mercy. She had devoured the Korthan warriors who fought with honor. She had broken the Veltis monks who prayed to their gods as her children fed on their bodies. She had never encountered prey like this. Her hive ship was massive. 3 kilometers of organic armor and weapons grown over decades. Inside, millions of her children waited, ready to swarm and consume. Below on the broken world of Thessia 9, her advance forces were in disarray. The new prey, humans, her scouts called them, were doing the impossible. They were winning. The Hive Queen sent a pheromone signal. Attack. Overwhelm. Feed. Captain Maria Chen watched the enemy hive ship approach. It was beautiful in a horrible way. All organic curves and chitin plates that shifted colors. Beautiful and full of death. Omega warheads locked, her weapons officer reported. We have firing solution. The Council fleet is hailing us again, Captain, communications added. They're ordering us to stand down. They say the Omega Protocol violates the Stellar Accords on biological warfare. Chen had read those accords. They banned chemical weapons, biological agents, genetic warfare, anything that caused unnecessary suffering. The galaxy's civilized species had agreed centuries ago that some weapons were too terrible to use. Earth had never signed those accords. Tell the Council we appreciate their concern, Chen said flatly. Fire Omega packages 1 through 6. The warheads launched. They were small, barely larger than a person. They accelerated toward the hive ship, and point defense systems tried to shoot them down. Some succeeded. 3 got through. They did not explode. Instead, they sprayed their contents across the hive ship's surface. Within seconds, the biological agent went to work. The Krovax had evolved to eat everything. Their digestive systems could break down almost any organic compound. That was their strength. It was also their weakness. The human bioweapon was designed to do one thing: make the Krovax eat themselves. The agent mimicked Krovax pheromones, but with a twist. It triggered feeding responses in the parts of their brains that controlled hunger. Every Krovax that came in contact with it suddenly became ravenous. And the nearest food was other Krovax. On the Council flagship, the observers watched in horror as the hive ship tore itself apart from the inside. Krovax attacked each other in feeding frenzies. The Hive Queen's control signals were ignored as her children went mad with hunger. Turn it off, Admiral Krenthis whispered. For the love of the ancestors, tell them to stop. But there was no stopping it. The bioweapon spread through the hive ship like wildfire. Within 20 minutes, the massive vessel was a tomb, filled with the bodies of Krovax that had eaten each other into extinction. Quirith felt sick. He had asked for this. He had convinced the Council to contact Earth. and now he was watching an entire species commit involuntary suicide. War is supposed to have rules, he said quietly. Your rules, came a voice behind him. General Okoye had arrived on the council flagship an hour ago to observe and advise. He stood now, watching the displays with calm, dark eyes. You wrote rules for war after the worst had already happened to you. You learned to fight nice because you could afford to. Humans can't afford nice. We never could. But this is monstrous, Quirith protested. Yes, Okoye agreed. War is monstrous. The Krovax are monstrous. Your rules mean nothing to them. They would have eaten every Velkar on that planet, then moved to the next system, then the next. How many billions die before your rules allow you to act? Quirith had no answer. On Thessia 9, Sergeant Webb's squad had fought their way to a Velkar shelter. Inside, 200 survivors huddled in the darkness. They were mostly children, their crystalline bodies small and fragile. When the Marines entered, the Velkar screamed. Webb removed his helmet. His face was scarred from an old burn and his eyes were tired. He held up his hands, showing he was unarmed. We're here to help, he said slowly. From Earth, we're here to help. A Velkar adult, her body cracked and leaking, stepped forward. You are the ones from the Death World. We heard your weapons. We heard the screaming of the swarm. Yes, ma'am. Can you walk? We need to get everyone to the evacuation point. The Krovax are everywhere. We cannot, ma'am, Webb said gently. The Krovax ain't gonna be a problem anymore. Trust me, they led the survivors through the city streets. The Krovax they encountered were different now, confused. Some attacked, but without coordination. The Marines put them down efficiently. Others just wandered, their hive mind connection severed by the death of their queen. Private Chen walked beside a Velkar child who could not stop shaking. The little one kept looking at the Marines' armor, at the weapons, at the dried ichor that covered everything. Are you a monster? The child asked in broken universal. Chen knelt down. Sometimes, she admitted. But not to you. Never to you. Back in orbit, Captain Chen faced a harder decision. The Krovax had established breeding grounds on one of Thessia 9's moons. Intelligence said there were thousands of eggs there, maybe millions. In a few months they would hatch. The swarm would return, Captain, Torres said carefully. The Council has provided protocols for neutralizing Krovax breeding sites. It involves a specialized radiation treatment that sterilizes the eggs without damaging the moon's surface. How long does it take? 3 weeks to set up. 6 weeks to complete. The Velkar don't have 9 weeks. Chen pulled up the tactical display. What's the fastest way? Torres was silent. Lieutenant, that's an order. Orbital bombardment, ma'am. Sustained nuclear strikes. Turn the whole moon into glass. The heat would kill everything. Chen closed her eyes. She thought about her daughter back on Earth. Thought about the Velkar children in the shelters below. Thought about what would happen if those eggs hatched. How many warheads do we have left? Enough, Captain. Then do it. The nuclear weapons fell on the moon like angry gods. Each detonation lit up space with artificial suns. The moon's surface melted, flowed, and reformed as volcanic glass. Nothing organic could survive. The Krovax eggs burned, and with them, the next generation of the swarm. On the Council flagship, they watched in silence. Quirith could not stop shaking. They just destroyed an entire moon, he whispered. They destroyed a threat, Okoye corrected. In human history, we've learned hard lessons about leaving threats alive because we hope they'll change. The Krovax don't change. They don't negotiate. They eat or they die. Captain Chen chose to make them die before they could eat anyone else. But the rules... Your rules failed, Okoye said bluntly. That's why you called us. Because when the monsters come, you need monsters to fight them. You need someone willing to do what's necessary no matter how dirty it makes their hands. The battle for Thessia 9 lasted 4 more days. The surviving Krovax fought with desperation, but without their queen, without their breeding grounds, they were just animals. Dangerous animals, but animals nonetheless. The Marines hunted them through the ruins. It was brutal work. Close quarters combat in collapsed buildings, through underground tunnels in the dark places where the swarm tried to hide. The Marines did not give up. They did not stop. They were persistence hunters, evolved on a world where the biggest advantage was just refusing to quit. Sergeant Webb's squad went 72 hours without relief. They ran out of ammunition and used captured Krovax bioweapons. They ran out of water and drank from Velkar supplies that was barely drinkable for humans. They ran out of sleep and pushed through on stimulants and pure stubbornness. When they finally cleared the last nest, Webb sat down on a pile of rubble and just breathed. His armor was cracked. His rifle was held together with tape and prayers. He had lost 3 soldiers to the swarm. Private Chen sat down next to him. "Sarge, the captain's calling for evac." "We're done." "We're never done, kid," Webb said tiredly. "But we're done here. That's enough." They lifted off in the assault craft, leaving behind a planet that would need decades to recover. The Velkar survivors watched them go, these frightening saviors from the death world. Some were grateful. Others were terrified. Most felt both at once. In orbit, Captain Chen received the casualty reports. 23 dead, 46 wounded, 1 ship damaged, and Thessia 9 was saved. She also received a message from the Galactic Council. It was a summons. They wanted to discuss concerning methods and potential violations and appropriate use of force. Chen smiled grimly. "Tell them we'll be happy to attend, right after we finish rescuing their people." The human fleet departed the Thessia system, leaving behind Council peacekeepers to handle the aftermath. As they jumped to FTL, Chen stood on the bridge and thought about what they had done. The Krovaks they had killed. The moon they had destroyed. The rules they had broken. "Captain," Torres asked quietly, "do you think we did the right thing?" Chen watched the stars shift. "I think we did the only thing. Whether it was right? That's for the historians to decide. We're just soldiers. We do what's necessary and live with it after." Behind them, the Krovaks Hive Queen's final message spread through the galaxy on every frequency. The signal was simple and terrifying. "Beware the humans. Beware the Deathworld species. We have consumed 1,000 civilizations. None fought like them. They do not know fear." 3 months after the Battle of Thessia 9, the Velkar were still counting their dead. Ambassador Velrus stood in what had been the Central Archive, the heart of her civilization's collected knowledge. The building still stood, but barely. Scorch marks covered the walls where human weapons had burned away Krovak swarms. The beautiful crystal sculptures that had taken centuries to grow were now just shards on the floor. She picked up a piece. It had been part of the Remembrance Wall, where Velkar recorded the names of their ancestors. Now those names were dust. "We survived," she said to the empty room. But what did we survive as? Outside, Velkar civilians moved through the streets with haunted eyes. They flinched at loud noises. They had nightmares about the chittering of Krovak's mandibles and the thunder of human guns. The children especially. They had seen things that no child should see. Dr. Sarah Mbeki worked in the field hospital that the humans had established in the city's outskirts. She was 34 years old, had spent 6 years in the Marine Corps, and 3 more getting her medical degree. She had volunteered for the Thessia deployment because someone had to help. The Velkar were difficult patients. Their crystalline biology was nothing like human physiology. Mbeki had to learn as she went, making educated guesses based on xenobiology textbooks and prayer. She had lost patience, saved others. Every day was a struggle. A Velkar child was brought in, her arm shattered by falling debris. Mbeki examined the fracture carefully. The crystal structure was complex, with veins of glowing fluid running through it. Like tree sap, if tree sap carried neural signals and nutrients. "I need to stabilize the break," she explained through a translator. "It's going to hurt. I'm sorry." The child's mother held her daughter's other hand. Her face, if it could be called a face, was expressionless. Velkar did not have muscles for expression, but her body language spoke volumes. Fear, distrust. "You are one of them," the mother said. "One of the humans who brought such violence to our world." Mbeki looked up. "Yes, and I'm one of the humans trying to fix it." "Hold her steady." She worked quickly, applying a compound that would help the crystal regrow along the proper lines. The child whimpered, a sound like wind through crystal chimes. When it was done, Mbeki stepped back. "Change the dressing every 2 days. Keep it clean. She should heal fully in about 6 weeks." The mother gathered her child and left without another word. Mbeki watched them go and felt the weight of it all pressing down on her shoulders. "They hate us," she said to no one in particular. "Can you blame them?" Captain Chen stood in the doorway. She looked tired. She had been on Thessia 9 for 3 weeks now, overseeing the humanitarian efforts. We saved their lives, but we also showed them what monsters look like, and the monsters look like us. In the Galactic Council chambers, the debate had been raging for weeks. The large circular room was filled with representatives from dozens of species, all arguing at once. The translation system struggled to keep up. The humans violated 13 separate articles of the Stellar Accords. Counselor Vreet insisted, her tentacles waving emphatically. Chemical warfare, biological weapons, nuclear bombardment of celestial bodies. These are prohibited for good reason. They saved the Velkar, Quirith countered. He had become humanity's most vocal defender, which surprised even himself. Every projection said the Krovax would have consumed the entire population within days. The humans arrived and stopped them. At what cost? Admiral Krenthus leaned forward, his forearms folded. An entire moon sterilized. Breeding populations of native Thessian wildlife caught in the bombardment and destroyed. Chemical agents that will take decades to fully break down in the ecosystem. Yes, the Velkar live, but they live in a poisoned world. Counselor Thrain, the massive blue-furred being, spoke carefully. I have reviewed the combat recordings. The human tactics were effective, brutal, yes, but effective if we face another Krovax incursion. Can we afford to fight with one hand tied behind our backs by rules the enemy does not follow? Rules exist to separate civilization from barbarism. Vreet shot back. Without them, we are no better than the Krovax ourselves. The Krovax would have eaten us, came a new voice. Ambassador Velrus had arrived, walking slowly into the chamber. Her body was still healing, crystal regrowth visible along her cracks. They would have eaten our children, our elders, everyone. The humans stopped them. Yes, their methods were terrible. Yes, we are traumatized. But we breathe. Our species continues. Can you put a price on that? The chamber fell silent. On Earth, in a small apartment in Seattle, Captain Chen's daughter Emma watched the news coverage. She was 12 years old, and she had not seen her mother in person for 6 months. Video calls were not the same. The news showed footage from Thessia 9. Human soldiers in armor, weapons in hand, standing among ruins. The anchor was saying something about war crimes and ethical concerns. Emma turned it off. She went to her room and looked at the picture on her desk. Her mom in dress uniform smiling. Before Thessia. Before everything changed. Emma's phone buzzed. A message from her mom. Coming home next week. Can't wait to see you. Love you more than all the stars. Emma typed back. Love you too. Are you okay? 3 dots appeared, then disappeared. Then appeared again. Finally. I will be, I hope. Back on Thessia 9, Sergeant Webb and what remained of his squad were preparing to depart. They had spent 3 months doing cleanup operations, hunting down the last scattered Krovax, helping with reconstruction. It was not the kind of work Marines usually did, but they did it anyway. Private Chen, still no relation to the captain, was teaching Velkar children how to play soccer. Or trying to. The kids were terrified of her at first, but she was patient. She showed them the ball, demonstrated kicking, even let one of them knock her down. The kids' fear slowly turned to curiosity. One of the Velkar children, a little one named Sela, had attached herself to Private Chen. She followed the Marine everywhere, asking questions in broken English. Why you fight the bad things? Sela asked. Chen sat down on a chunk of rubble, the kid beside her. Because someone has to, and we're good at it. You scary. Yeah, we are. Sorry about that. But you save us. Chen looked at the child's crystalline face, at the innocence still visible despite everything. Yeah, we did. Thank you. 2 words. Simple. But they hit Chen like a physical blow. She felt tears burning in her eyes. 3 months of combat, of nightmares, of guilt and fear and exhaustion, and these 2 words cracked something open inside her. You're welcome, kid. The tribunal was scheduled for the end of the month. The Galactic Council would formally review human conduct during the Thessia operation. Captain Chen had been summoned to testify. So had General Okoye, Sergeant Webb, and half a dozen other human personnel. The night before they left Thessia 9, Chen stood on a hill overlooking the capital city. Lights were coming back on, one building at a time. The Velkar were rebuilding. It would take years, maybe decades, but they would rebuild. Dr. Mbeki climbed the hill and stood beside her. "You doing okay, Captain?" "I ordered the death of millions of Krovaks," Chen said quietly. "I destroyed a moon. I authorized the use of weapons that violate every civilized standard of warfare. No, Doc, I'm not doing okay. You saved a species from extinction. Does that make it right?" Mbeki was quiet for a long moment. "I don't know. I'm just a doctor. I fix what's broken. You're a soldier. You break what needs breaking. Maybe neither of us will ever know if it was right. We just know it was necessary." Chen pulled out her tablet and opened the casualty reports. 23 humans dead, 46 wounded, but also 1.2 million Velkar civilians saved, 600,000 Krovaks eliminated, preventing future attacks on other worlds. The math was simple. The ethics were anything but. "The Council wants to put us on trial," Chen said. "They want to make an example of us. Show that even Deathworlders have to follow the rules." "What do you think will happen?" Chen smiled grimly. "I think they're going to learn something about humans. We don't apologize for surviving. We don't apologize for protecting the innocent. If they want to punish us for that, let them try." Far away in the cold depths of space, a Krovak scout ship detected the aftermath of Thessia 9. It analyzed the chemical signatures, the radiation traces, the scattered remains of the Hive Queen. The scout ship's primitive intelligence processed this information and came to a conclusion. These new prey were dangerous. The scout ship turned and fled into the depths of space, carrying its warning. Across the galaxy, other Krovaks' hives received the message. Some dismissed it. Others began adjusting their strategies, and a few, the oldest and wisest of the Hive Queens, made a decision. They would avoid human space. They would find easier prey. For the first time in their species' history, the Krovaks had learned fear. But on Thessia 9, the Velkar had learned something too. They had learned that salvation sometimes comes in a terrible form. They had learned that the universe is not kind, and sometimes the only thing standing between civilization and extinction is someone willing to be monstrous. Ambassador Velrus stood in the rebuilt council chamber and looked at the messages flooding in from across the galaxy. Some condemned the humans. Others praised them. Most were simply afraid. "What have we unleashed?" Councillor Vreet asked. Velrus thought about her dead colleagues, her destroyed cities. The Galactic Council's Central Tribunal was the most impressive room Captain Maria Chen had ever seen. The chamber was a perfect sphere, 50 meters in diameter, with seats for representatives from every council species arranged in concentric rings. At the center, a platform floated in the air, held there by technology Chen did not understand. She stood on that platform now in her dress uniform, with the eyes of the galaxy watching. "Captain Chen," Councillor Vreet began, "you stand accused of 13 violations of the Stellar Accords, including but not limited to the unauthorized use of chemical weapons, biological warfare, and the nuclear bombardment of a celestial body. How do you plead?" Chen met the councillor's many eyes calmly. "I plead guilty to every charge." A murmur ran through the chamber. Quirith, sitting in the observer section, closed his eyes. He had hoped Chen would defend herself. Instead, she had just confessed. "You admit to these crimes?" Admiral Krenthis leaned forward. "Do you understand the severity of what you have done?" "Yes, sir. I understand perfectly." "Then explain yourself," Councillor Thrain rumbled. "The Council deserves to know why you chose to violate the laws of civilized warfare." Chen was quiet for a moment. Then she spoke, her voice carrying clearly through the chamber's acoustics. "Before I answer that, I'd like to show you something." With the Council's permission, Vreet's tentacles twitched in what might have been irritation. "Proceed." Chen pulled out a data chip and inserted it into the platform's interface. A holographic display flickered to life above her head. It showed Earth. Not the pretty tourist images of blue oceans and green continents. These were images of human history. "This is my home world," Chen said. "Class 12 Deathworld." "But you knew that. What you don't know is what that really means." The images changed. Ancient humans hunting with primitive spears. We evolved as persistence hunters. Not the fastest. Not the strongest. But we could outlast anything. We would chase prey until it collapsed from exhaustion. More images. Cities destroyed by earthquakes. Coastlines devastated by tsunamis. Forests burning. Our planet tried to kill us constantly. Earthquakes, volcanoes, storms that could level cities. Ice ages that lasted thousands of years. We survived all of it. The images shifted to human warfare. Ancient battles with swords and spears. Modern conflicts with tanks and aircraft. And we fought each other. For resources. For land, for ideas. We developed weapons that could destroy our entire world. We came so close to using them. Chen's voice was steady, but there was emotion underneath. "Do you know what the first nuclear bombs were called?" "In my language? They were called Little Boy and Fat Man. We gave them cute names, because that's what humans do. We name the terrible things to make them easier to live with." The hologram showed Hiroshima, Nagasaki. Cities turned to ash in seconds. "We did that to ourselves," Chen said. "Not to aliens, not to invaders, to other humans, because we were at war and we decided that ending it quickly would save more lives than letting it continue." She paused, letting that sink in. "You asked me why I violated your laws. Here's the truth, I didn't violate your laws. I never agreed to them. Earth never signed your accords. We read your rules for warfare and we said no, because your rules assume that both sides want to follow rules. The Krovaks don't care about rules. They eat or they die. That's all." The hologram changed again. This time it showed the Battle of Thessia 9 from the human perspective. The swarms of Krovaks, the desperate fighting, the moments when it looked like they would lose. "I had a choice," Chen said quietly. "I could fight clean and watch the Velkar die. Or I could fight dirty and maybe save them. I chose to save them. And yes, I used weapons you consider barbaric. I authorized tactics you call war crimes. I destroyed a breeding ground to prevent future attacks." She looked around at the assembled council. "And I would do it all again. Every single decision. Because at the end of the day, the Velkar are still alive. Their children still have a future. And the Krovaks learned that there are some species they cannot simply consume." "You speak of necessity," Freet said. "But necessity does not excuse atrocity, doesn't it?" Chen's voice hardened. "You sent us a distress call. You begged for help. You knew what we were. You read the reports. You knew that humans are dangerous. But you called us anyway because you were desperate. And now you want to punish us for being exactly what you needed?" General Okoye stood up in the observer section. "May I address the council?" Councillor Thrain nodded. "Speak, General." Okoye walked down to stand beside Chen. The old soldier looked tired but unbowed. "I've been in the military for 40 years. I've fought in 3 wars on Earth and helped train forces for a dozen others. You know what I've learned? War's ugly. It's always ugly. There is no such thing as a clean war or a civilized war. There's just war. And the only thing that matters in war is winning." He gestured at the holographic display. "You have protocols. Rules of engagement. Proper procedures for everything. That's because you've had peace for so long that you've forgotten what real war looks like. The Krovaks reminded you, and you didn't know what to do, so you called the species that never forgot. We have rules for good reason," Admiral Krenthis insisted. "Without them, we become the very monsters we fight." "Maybe," Okoye said. "Or maybe your rules only work when everyone agrees to follow them." The Krovaks didn't agree. They don't negotiate. They don't take prisoners. They don't care about your notions of honor or proportional response. They eat and they breed and they move on. Captain Chen stopped them the only way possible. By being more ruthless than they were, Quirith stood up. "May I speak?" "Junior Diplomat Quirith," Freet said. "You are here as an observer only. I know, but I'm also the one who suggested contacting Earth in the first place. This is partially my responsibility. Then speak." Quirith walked down to the central platform. His silver skin had turned darker with stress over the past weeks. "I read the files on humanity. All of them. I was fascinated by the species that survived on a world that should have killed them. I thought they would be noble saviors. Heroes from the old stories." He looked at Chen. "And then I watched what they actually did. The bioweapons. The nuclear strikes. The sheer brutality of their tactics. I was horrified. I thought I had made a terrible mistake. Chen met his gaze steadily. But then, Quirith continued, I went to Thessia 9. I walked through the cities. I met the survivors. Do you know what they told me? They said the humans were terrifying. They said the humans brought devastation, but they also said the humans saved them. He turned to face the council. I spoke with a Velkar child named Sela. She was rescued by a human marine who had been fighting for 72 hours straight. This marine had killed hundreds of Krovaks, maybe thousands. Her armor was covered in their blood, and she still took the time to be gentle with a frightened child. Quirith's voice was trembling now. That's what humans are. They're capable of terrible violence, but they're also capable of great compassion. They will burn down a moon to protect the innocent. They will use weapons we consider monstrous to stop monsters. And yes, it's brutal. Yes, it violates our rules. But at the end of the day, the Velkar children are still alive. Can you put a price on that? The chamber was silent. Ambassador Velris stood up. Her crystalline body still bore the marks of the Krovak's attack. Cracks that would never fully heal. May I speak for my people? You may, Counselor Thrain said. Velris walked down slowly. The humans saved us. They violated your laws to do it. They used weapons that horrify civilized species. They did things that will haunt them for the rest of their lives. And they did it all for a species they had never met before. She stood beside Chen. I do not forgive the humans for the destruction they brought. I do not excuse their methods, but I thank them for our survival. And I ask the Council, what would you have done in their place? Would you have let us die to preserve your rules, or would you have done whatever it took to save us? The vote took 3 hours. The Council was split almost evenly. Some wanted to ban humans from Council space. Others wanted to honor them. In the end, a compromise was reached. The ruling came from Counselor Thrain, Captain Maria Chen, General James Okoye. The Council finds that while your methods violated numerous articles of the Stellar Accords, you acted in defense of a member species under imminent threat of extinction. Therefore, we do not impose criminal penalties. Chen felt something in her chest unclench slightly. However, Thrain continued, the Council cannot allow such tactics to become standard practice. Therefore, we establish the following terms. Earth is granted full membership in the Galactic Council, with all rights and privileges thereof. However, human military forces may only be deployed in response to existential threats and must operate under oversight by a joint council committee. Quirith smiled. They had done it. Humanity was no longer quarantined. Additionally, Thrain said, we established the Thessia Accords. These new protocols recognize that some threats cannot be met with conventional warfare. When facing species like the Krovaks, the Council may authorize the use of enhanced military measures, including those previously banned, but only as a last resort, and only with full Council approval. In other words, Okoye said quietly to Chen, they're adopting human tactics. Just slowly.